Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone and hello. Welcome to our engineering webinar series. We hope you and yours are continuing to do very well during this year. My name is Carrie Berglund and I'm a customer consultant here in the Elsevier engineering portfolio for the US government. It's my pleasure today to introduce my colleague, Chris Cogswell, here at Elsevier, who will talk to us today about artificial intelligence for the engineering workforce. Please feel free during this presentation to write your questions in the question and answer queue, and we will go ahead and try to answer them by the end of the session. But do feel free to be very interactive and pop those questions in there, and we will queue them up. So to get started, just to kind of give us a flavor, a little flavor of what we're going to talk about today and see how much our audience may know about the subject, we're going to do a little poll. Let's see. It's more trivia, actually. So this trivia, when was the first description of a robot? Take a chance, take a pick. I see some of our participation coming in. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and end the answering. The correct answer is pre-1850, believe it or not. And that is something that I think Chris is going to talk a little bit about. Let's go ahead. We have a second. And from that point, I think I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to Chris because I think he's got a lot to cover. And we'll go ahead and do indeed enter those questions in the Q&A. And without much further ado, take it away, Chris.
Thank you, Carrie. All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Chris Cogswell. So before we get started here, just wanted to give a quick little bit of background on me. So yep, my name is Chris Cogswell. I'm originally from New York City. Went to the University of New Hampshire to get my Bachelor's of Science in Chemical Engineering and Philosophy, and then Northeastern University, where I did a PhD in Chemical Engineering. So actually, I'm going to stop my video here. And actually, the first thing I'm going to do, we're going to use these polls a little bit here today. So the first poll I'm going to do here is, no end polling. Okay, 1 second here. So I'm going to ask folks to answer this first poll, please, which is on, have you used Knovel before or EV? And do you work in AI today or artificial intelligence? Great. Okay. Thank you so much, folks, for your participation. We're going to let this one poll here go for a couple of seconds more here as more and more people vote. Okay, great. So yeah, so it looks like it's a pretty good spread of folks, actually, pretty even around. So that's really great. Thank you so much for your participation here. And I'm going to end this polling now, and then we're going to go ahead and get started into the presentation. So actually, like Carrie said, I always like to start off my presentations with a little bit of trivia, because that's kind of something that I really like to do, and I kind of frankly miss it during COVID. The first question we asked you guys was, when was the first mention of a robotic system? So for those that don't know, the history of artificial intelligence is really deep. It actually goes back to quite some time, pre-1950 actually, or pre-1850, as Carrie said. But the modern developments really started with these three figures here on the screen: John von Neumann, Kurt Gödel, and then Alan Turing. So 1913 saw Bertrand Russell and Alfred North Whitehead publish their Principia Mathematica, which is really the first true work on formal logic. And AI, or artificial intelligence, really began with this idea that could we transition human thought into formalized logical thought or mathematical thought, which then can be systematized. 1931, Kurt Gödel developed his integer-based programming language, really one of the first computer languages out there. 45, game theory was developed and published by von Neumann and Oscar Morgenstern. They actually used it for economics. 46 saw Alan Turing publish the first paper on a stored program computer. He had a couple of different computers with awesome names like Delilah. And then 1956 saw the first AI research programs begin at Dartmouth College and Carnegie Mellon University. So that first question we asked, when was the first mention of robotic system? And a lot of you answered the 50s and 60s. Actually, interestingly enough, the first description of artificial intelligence and robotics comes from antiquity. So here are some actually really cool images that I really like. So one of these is by Heron of Alexandria. He wrote a book called The Automata, or Machines of Movement. That's this image here. We also had the Greeks and the Islamic philosophers. So this here is an image of Talos, who's actually the first robot we see described in the literature. Talos was a bronze automata who protected the city of Crete. He would walk around on a track and throw rocks at ships. So kind of interesting. And then Al-Jazari wrote his work on automatas in the 13th century, around the same time that Ramon Lull was working on some of his work on logical machines. And actually, it's from the name Al-Jazari that we get the term algorithm, which was some of the stuff that he was working on. So the second trivia question here that we're going to do with folks is, when is the first industrial use of robotics implemented? So I'm going to launch that poll here. So on the screen right now, what I'm showing are two graphic searches through Engineering Village, which is one of the tools that we're going to be talking about here today. So this is a search for artificial intelligence within Compendex, one of the tools that we work on. And so here you can see, or rather, sorry, this is from a patent search, excuse me. And so here you can see that in the timeline of artificial intelligence, it's quite slow in terms of patents down past the 1980s. But as things started picking up in the 1990s, as home computers and computerized systems became more efficient and easily used, the number of patents for things that included the term artificial intelligence really skyrocketed. So if you're currently working in that field, or if you're not right now, this is a great time to be in there, right? This is the time that this is really starting to explode out inside the literature. And if we actually look at who's doing that kind of work on artificial intelligence, we can see here that LG Electronics is a huge one, IBM, which makes sense, Samsung, Accenture, Microsoft, Bank of America, right? All of these companies make some sense here. So it's really applicable across a huge scope of different things, from finance to electronics to home computers and other things like that. Okay, so I'm going to end this poll here. So actually, really interestingly, most people here said 1950, 1960 saw the first use of industrial robots. You're so close. So actually, what's considered the first industrial robot was the Unimate system at the GM assembly line plant at Inland Fisher Guide Plant in Ewing Township, New Jersey. This is an image of the Unimate system. Essentially what this robot did is it would grab car parts, it would then weld them onto the auto bodies. And the reason that they wanted a computerized system to do this, or a robot to do this, was because the job itself was actually really dangerous. We don't really think of like welding things as being particularly dangerous necessarily. I mean, it takes a lot of training and everything, of course. But in this case, actually, what ended up happening was these were die-cast parts, and I guess with the welding, it would release a lot of toxic fumes. And also, frankly, just the welding itself is dangerous. So the Unimate system was really that first system that we saw out there. And funnily enough, in 2003, it was inducted into the Robot Hall of Fame, which is pretty exciting. I didn't know that there was such a thing, so it was pretty cool about that. All right. So thank you for participating in the trivia. I hope that was at least a little bit fun, kind of broke up the monotony of this COVID life we're living in. In today's field of play, in terms of artificial intelligence, what I kind of wanted to showcase with those trivia questions was just how broad the subject is. Artificial intelligence has been around for an extremely long time, and it's also been applied to a tremendous amount of different fields. So if you're trying to get into this field today, it can be a little bit hard. It's like getting a lot of information shot at you through a fire hose, right? And you only need maybe a small amount of that kind of info. So if we look here at the classification codes from EV related to artificial intelligence, we can see that they kind of break up into a couple of broad categories: machine learning, natural language processing, expert systems, or machines that can do the work of a human expert, computerized vision, and computerized speech. And those are kind of the general subtypes that are used for this. Another subtype is planning, forecasting. That's often lumped in with expert systems. That's stuff like forecasting of the financial marketplace or things like that. But for the purposes of this talk today, we're going to be defining AI as the use of intelligent agents to solve problems. So an intelligent agent is any autonomous device that can perceive its environment for info, pull in that information and learn from it in some way, and then use that info to maximize the success of a given task. So a really simple example of that is a thermostat, actually. The thermostat in your home right now, it measures the temperature of the room. It then inputs that information that it gained from the environment, and then it will alter the output of air or heat to the room so that it can achieve the set point that you've given it. So really, AI can be something as simple as a thermostat, or it can be something as complicated as a robot, right? A fully human conscious sort of thing, although that doesn't exist yet. So we're going to be talking today about the use of AI in the engineering workforce. But specifically, we're going to talk about two tools that we have that we think will be valuable for you in the work that you're doing in this field. So the first tool that we'll be talking about is Knovel, which will give you access to a lot of full text content on this field. And then Engineering Village, which is a tool that actually we build that actually includes quite a bit of machine learning and data sorting. Actually, we use some artificial intelligence research to build our tool, but it can be very valuable in searching for and doing something like, say, a simple literature review of this field, which is really where we're going to focus in on today. And with that, I'm going to jump into the tools. So, okay. So can everybody see my screen? Check the chat to see here.
Yes.
Yes, perfect. Okay, great. Okay, that's good stuff. All right, so this is Knovel. Now, one of the things that I actually did specially for this talk today is if I go over in here to the My Knovel section on the Knovel tool, I'm going to go to my Knovel, and what you'll notice is I have a lot of folders, right? And I have a lot of folders. Because I make a lot of these for different clients and things. But the one that I made specifically for today's section is this folder on artificial intelligence. So if I click in here, what I can actually see is a lot of different content that I've saved that I thought would be useful for this chat here today. So we're looking at things like data science projects within Python, the machine learning cookbook, handbook of research on big data clustering and machine learning for developers or algorithms, or their use in different places. So if after this talk you would be interested in getting access to this folder so that you can use it on your Knovel account, please do let me know, and I can share it with you pretty easily. It's not really hard to do that through Knovel, and it's frankly, I think, a really great feature for building up a team. Okay, so if I go here to the home page, if I just search for something simple like artificial intelligence, the first thing you'll notice is I have refined by concept here on the left-hand side. So I may not know what I'm looking for in terms of artificial intelligence. However, we've built these tools in such a way that actually the artificial intelligence within Knovel is able to give some suggestions here for you. So for example, maybe I'm interested in artificial intelligence in terms of data mining, because that's something that I'm doing right now in my company, let's say. So I can click on this, and it will limit the number of options I have. So it went from 1,100 plus books and text and reference content to 140 plus. Now, if I click in here, I can see that the content that's available to me, right? So I'm going to go in here to books and text. So I can see here that I have book content itself. I have chapters. I also have conference proceedings. And there's a lot of other stuff here on Knovel as well that we can't really get into today, but I'm happy to talk about any other time. But so here, for example, maybe I'm interested in looking at this one. So this is from the book AI Techniques for Reliability Prediction for Electronic Components, published in 2020. So I'm going to click in here and see what this book has to say. And so as I'm looking here, we can see this is the advantages of artificial intelligence, disadvantages of artificial intelligence. There's some computational methods and things. And I can actually click through here and see, okay, well, what is this talking about for me? Right, so if I scroll up here to the beginning, this is a whole chapter on artificial intelligence. So maybe as I'm reading this, I think it's really useful. So here, for example, I can highlight this. I can add a note, and I can say something like, let's say, AI for wireless networks, useful for project, 140A or something, right? I can add this note for myself. And then again, I can actually save this to my Knovel. Now, I already created a folder, but if I wanted to, I could go here to create new folder. But I'm going to go down to my artificial intelligence folder, and I'll add that in here. So save that, and now it's there on my Knovel account. And so that'll be automatically shared with other folks too that have that folder already. So this tool is a really nice way for you to do some project kind of fundamental data gathering or information gathering so that you're all working from one common place, right? You're not just kind of jumping around from reference work to reference work. All right. Now, if I ran a search for artificial intelligence again here, one of the things you'll notice that can come up here on the left-hand side are these external links. So this here will bring me to Compendex from Engineering Village, and that's actually the next tool that we're going to look at. So if I click here and pop this open, it's going to actually allow me to run that search automatically. So if I click in here to search Engineering Village, it'll run the search for me. And now here you're going to see we have 801,000 records. That is going to be too long for anyone to read in a lifetime, right? So what I want to do is start faceting down. Now, one of the values of this tool, or one of the things that I really like about it, is that even in a field that maybe you don't know a lot about, right? So when we talked in the beginning, it was pretty even, but the majority of people actually on the last question said that they weren't currently working in AI, or they weren't currently using artificial intelligence for their jobs. So what I can actually do is, maybe I don't know a lot about artificial intelligence. So I'll run a simple search for artificial intelligence in Engineering Village. And then on the left-hand side here, I'm going to do some refinements. Now, our system actually utilizes, like I said, AI and specifically machine learning. And so what it's doing, if I click into one of these things, this abstract here has a lot of keywords, right? It has a lot of terms that are of interest for us. It has a lot of info. That info is what we call metadata. So we pull out the metadata and then we make it searchable on the tool. And that's really the value of Engineering Village versus say something like Google, where that metadata, although it's collected by Google, it's never shown to the user, right? You can't use it for data mining and things like that. So for example, here, I'm gonna go back to my result. And so here on the left-hand side, you can see the metadata facets that actually I can click through. So for example here, maybe I want to only look at, well, let's start simple. I'm going to look at the years. How has research on artificial intelligence changed over time? So if I click on here onto this chart and then click on max, I can see over the course of the database's lifetime how research in artificial intelligence has changed. And so you can see that it was pretty steadily low back early on, right? You can see we actually have a record from 1889, likely something in mathematics or theory. But so you can see that really the research field started to gain traction in the 1970s, was pretty low, but then caught fire in the late 80s, and then really saw a huge emergence in the 2000s. And from that point on, it's kind of hit a plateau and remained pretty steady since 2010. All right, that's interesting. So maybe I want to learn a little bit more about what happened between, let's say, the early 80s and the 2000s. So what has changed between the beginning of this field to now today? So what I can do is here on my year options, if I click on here to view more, or I actually could have just clicked over here, I can choose to look at certain years. So maybe I just want to look at these 4 years, so 1980 to 1983. I'm going to limit my search to those. And so what I can now look at is things like who is doing that research, right? So these are the the affiliations of the authors. So it looks like MIT, Aarhus University, the University of München, University of Edinburgh, and MIT again, but a different place at MIT, University of Helsinki, and then IBM. Right, so these are our top couple of places. So MIT, University of München, Aarhus University, University of Edinburgh, and IBM. Interesting. I can see here who were the publishers, or who the source titles were. What were the journal articles or the journals that were being looked at that time? So most of the publication was occurring here in lecture notes in computer science. Then there was a journal, looks like, called Artificial Intelligence, and then ACMA, or ACM, SIGAT, Sigmund, SIGART Symposium on Database Systems. Interesting. I can look at it here to see what countries were doing all that research. Right, so it's the United States, followed by Germany, the UK, France, and then Japan. Interesting. And I can also look at some of the more specific information. So for example here, I can look at classification code. If I click in here, what I can then read is I can see where were these journal articles in, where were these journal articles, or what were these journal articles being published in regards to specific concepts or ideas. So for example here, we can see that a big part of this was data handling and applications, industrial engineering management, automatic control principles, engineering profession generally, and then computer theory, right? Interestingly too, in the 1980s, 246 bioengineering and biology. That's really interesting. Okay. And I can also look here at controlled vocabulary. Now, the controlled vocabulary versus the classification code, this is a bit more specific. So classification code, I like to think about in terms of things like, say, okay, it's mathematics, but then the controlled vocabulary might be something like, say, algebra or trigonometry or calculus, right? So they're kind of subsets of a larger set. So here we can see system science and cybernetics, artificial intelligence, of course, computers, computer science, automata theory, semantics, and algebra. So really basic stuff, right? Building the language of AI. Okay, so that was our search for 1980s. Let's look at today. So I'm going to X out here. Go back to my years. And now I'm going to pick just the last couple years. So here I clicked on those and I can limit it to those options. All right, and now let's look at the same stuff we looked at before. So first, let's start at the author affiliation. And the first thing we're going to notice is that the universities that did the most research here have changed drastically, right? So at the beginning, if you remember, it was like the University of München, it was MIT, it was IBM. IBM is still there, but if we look at the others here, we're looking at Microsoft, the University of California, the University of the Chinese Academy of Sciences, Carnegie Mellon, and then again, the University of the Chinese Academy of Sciences, but another department within there. Really interesting. Similarly, if we look at the country that's doing publication, we can see a big change too. China is now by far the leader in that field, followed by the United States, Germany, the UK, and India coming up besides, say, France and Japan, which were our kind of fourth and fifth places before. If I look at the classification codes here, we can see that those have changed as well. So AI has become a top classification code on its own because it's going to become an emerging field. Then we're looking though here, data handling and applications, data processing and image processing, information theory, applications, and system science. So it seems like, at least from the literature, we've learned how to do the language part, and now we're starting to do more complicated tasks. If I look here then at the controlled vocabulary, I can see that even more clearly. So here, of course, AI is a top one, but then we're looking at things like neural networks, deep learning, learning systems, machine learning, semantics. Now, one thing I want to show before we finish this off here is if any of this was of particular interest to me, I can click in. So for instance, maybe I'm interested in computer vision. I can click on this and it'll build my search for me. So I went from being artificial intelligence in those couple of years to now being AI within those years and computer vision. And again, now I can do deeper dives into the literature itself as it exists. All right. And so with that, folks, I really want to thank you for attending here today and pass it back over to my moderator, Carrie.
Great, thanks so much, Chris. That was really really a great presentation and a lot of food for thought there. So I think what we'll do now is we'll go ahead and we'll do a quick poll and see. Let me pop out of this. See what everybody thought. Let's go ahead and launch our second poll. Did you find this session useful? And then would you like more information about AI on Elsevier's platforms? A little bit of time. Wonderful. Things are rolling in. Great. And it looks like we've got some really good results here. A lot of folks found it very useful, and we have some folks that want more. So I think good job, Chris. Very, very interesting. Let me go ahead now and take a quick look into the question and answer session. And there are a couple of questions. How can I research who may have funded some of this research? Where can I find that kind of information in the tools that you presented, Chris?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So that's one of the pieces of metadata that we pull out of the database. So actually here, let me pull back up on Engineering Village. So I'm going to X out of there. So if I look here at the last couple of years again, so here's that 120,000 records. One of the options or one of the facets that we didn't get to look at here was funding a sponsor. So here, if I open this up, I can actually see who's doing the funding there. Now, what's really nice about this is, for example, maybe I know that I have a company that I work with that has a huge European component. Maybe we want to go for research funding in Europe. I can then click here, say on the European Commission, click in and then see all of the work that they're funding. I can see what universities they're affiliated with, who the authors are, what topics they're funding, things like that. So I can really use this for some really strong competitive intelligence work that I can't really do with some other tools. Really good question.
Well, and actually it's almost like you knew what I was going to say next. They were wanting to understand, is there a way to determine a top competitor in a particular field of artificial intelligence?
Yeah, absolutely. So for example, let's say, so we're going to dig in a little bit more here then. So let's say I want to know that I'm working within, say, the United States, right? And I'm doing that work within the last couple of years, like we said, so I could limit my search there. And then actually what I can do here is I can look again at that author affiliation and I can see it. So maybe I'm interested, say, in what's going on at the Allen Institute for Artificial Intelligence. I can click here on that. And then now my search will include only that affiliation. And so now I can do the same kind of work that I was doing before, where I'm looking at, say, the controlled vocabulary. So this Allen Institute is mostly doing work in computational linguistics and natural language processing systems. I can see who their top authors are, what kind of classification codes they're working in, where they're publishing out of, stuff like that, right? So yeah, I can absolutely use this tool for that kind of information gathering as well.
Great, and then just one last question. How can you clarify once again the kind of information that you're pulling from a Knovel versus an Engineering Village for those that person may not be quite as familiar?
Absolutely. So Engineering Village is a powerful tool for kind of learning about and digging deeply into the literature that exists out there, for pulling metadata out of the literature. What Knovel gives you access to is full text content and reference information on these fields. So Knovel I'm going to, if I want to learn how to implement artificial intelligence or utilize it in my work. Engineering Village I'm using to learn about the field of artificial intelligence, new developments, and ways that I can, ways that maybe I want to begin a research program.
Awesome, great. Well, folks, with that, thank you so much, Chris. Really appreciate your time and I know the effort to put this together. I think it was a real hit. We want to thank you, the audience, for attending this webinar session. We typically hold these on each Thursday at this time, and we are taking a week off. We are at the end of the summer. Oh, everybody start to weep a bit. So we thought we'd take a week off at the very end of August, but we want to invite you to the next session, which will be around utilizing resources to research corrosion's impact in the civil, aerospace, and defense applications. Now, if you'd like an invitation to that session, please feel free to reach out to your customer consultant in engineering. If you don't know who your Elsevier contact is, please feel free to send me an email at k.berglund@elsevier.com. I'm sure Chris would also welcome that email request. If you would like any more in-depth information around any of the resources we have mentioned during the presentation today, or even some of the past recordings, there is quite a catalog of recordings now, please feel free to drop us an email or a call. I know that I speak for the entire engineering team that we welcome any and all feedback and inquiries. Thank you so much for your time, and we hope to see you back at the same time, same dial on September 3rd. Have a wonderful end of the summer week. Thank you.